Hi there, thanks for joining me today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. I created this card a week or so ago for a blog hop, and it's proved to be very popular and people have asked how it was made. So I thought this week for my Monday mashup I'm going to recreate it, but I'm going to recreate it in some different colours just so we can get a different feel for it, and also some slightly different products. So we're still going to use the butterflies. So the butterflies are taken from the Floating and Fluttering set here. So it's these three. They're actually come on one big stamp, which is great because they, you can stamp them all together and you can cut them all together as well because the die is also in one. I'm going to use the greeting Happy Birthday to You from here just to make it into a birthday card. So the colour scheme I'm kind of going with today, we're still going to use the black and the grey, but we're going to use some yellows and oranges. So I have chosen to use Mango Medley, I always call it Mango Medley, Mango Melody and So Saffron. So they're the colours that we're going to use to hopefully create the sort of different feel to it. And in the background here I used the poppy dies to actually create this cutout here, but I thought it'd be fun today to use some other products. So what I'm using is the wreath builder dies, and it's actually this wreath here with the leaves. I thought it would add something a little bit different to it really. So that's what we're going to use, but what we need to use is the actual negative of the die. Now the reason I've left this like this is because I wanted you to see when you actually cut the die out you're in two parts, so that causes a bit of a problem for what we're trying to achieve. So what we need to do is to secure those parts back together. So I'm going to take my actually I can use this cutout here. So if I just line it up where it's meant to be, so you can see that's where it's cut out from, and I just want to position my centre back where it was meant to be. I'm just going to remove that so I know that it's in the right place there, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a little bit of sticky tape, just normal average parcel sticky tape, because we're not using the whole of the die, we're only using part of it. So I'm going to position this where I want it. And then once I'm quite happy where it is, so that looks about right. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to stick in this one corner. I've just stuck down those two pieces together. Now you're going to have to be a little bit careful because obviously this is flapping around, and there is a chance that this sticky is going to appear on the back. So I think the best thing for me to do is to take just another bit of sticky tape, and I'm just going to stick this on the back as well, and that should prevent any nasty sort of sticky situations occurring. So what I've got to remember is that is obviously now covered at that point, so I'm only going to be using sort of this sort of section, this sort of 2/3 of my wreath here. So I'm going to take, first of all, my card. So I've used a basic black card. So I'm in the UK. So this is a standard C6 card, and it's the full A4 length, which is 29.75, scored at 14.85, and it's 10.5 wide. So that's just our standard card. I've also got a piece of basic grey card, and this measures 8.5 by the 14.85, and this is what we're going to create our base on. So I'm going to take my die. As I say, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful because obviously I've got two sections here, whereas when I used the original one, it only had the one piece, so it was slightly easier to do, but I just wanted to, add a slightly different effect to what we're doing today. Okay, so I'm going to take my grey granite ink pad, and I'm just using a blending brush. This is a slightly smaller one than what we have currently in the catalogue. These are just what I've had hanging around. You can use a sponge, you can use a dauber, you can use anything you want to. So please don't feel that you have to use what I'm using. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm just going to start sponging into the background. Now this does take a while to build up because I want to build it up quite gradually, and you can't always see it when you're actually working on it. Sometimes you have to actually lift your stencil to actually show you know what's happening. You could use a mask for this, so you could use one of our pre-made masks or stencils. That would work as well. This is just a different alternative way to use your dies, which was why I created it in the first place, just to show an alternative use for all our lovely dies that we have. So I can see colours starting to go down. I'm just going to lightly lift it. Now can you see that's started to give me a nice sort of leaf effect on the background. So what I'm going to do now is just going to move it, and again just being conscious of where my tape is here, and I'm going to repeat it. So you can do this as many times as you want to. It's entirely up to you. I'm layering on top of each other so that you get sort of a double sort of depth of colour. It's meant to be subtle, so don't kind of worry about it too much. Okay, so what I did next was I actually added some detail with some of our frost paint as well. So here I've got one of our grey granite re-inkers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our metallic frost paint that we have here, and I'm going to mix up just a drop of it with a drop of the re-inker. So I literally just need a drop. I don't need a lot at all. There we go. So it's just one little drop. I'm also going to take a drop of the re-inker. It's like an eyeball. And then this is just a cake pop stick or a lolly stick or whatever. So just mix them nicely together. So they look quite dark to begin with, but as you mix it up, you'll find that actually it goes quite light. So just give it a really good mix so that you've got a nice mix of that white paint and also the grey. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to take a sponge. So this is just an old sponge that I've got here. I'm going to take my stencil again. I just want to pick up some of this paint, and I'm just going to dab this in. I don't want to rub it through, because otherwise it could sort of ruck my actual stencil up. So I'm just sponging it through, and I'm not doing it too precisely. It's very loose, and it's just to give a nice sheen to the base of my card. Again, I'm just moving it around. Don't worry if it's not a complete leaf. We're looking just to give some depth and some different sort of shapes to our background, really. So don't worry too much. Okay, so that is our sponged background. So I can move all those pieces out of the way. So So now what we want to do is to actually create the splatters, which seem to be the thing that everyone sort of liked the look of. So I'm just going to quickly wipe my desk. So now moving on to the splatters. So the first thing I took was a dark grey granite pen, and I just, sorry, the other end, used the brush end, and just the lid of my pen, I just added some little grey splatters. So not too many, just enough just to give it a little bit of detail. Now once they dry, they go really subtle, so you won't really notice those massively, but they just add a little sort of something to the background. Okay, so then I took my frost paint again. So this is just our white frost paint, and I've taken an old paintbrush and dipping it in it. So what I want to do is just take some of that ink off the end and then very lightly splatter over the base. Now you don't have a huge amount of control over this, so just be a little bit careful, and don't get too close. Do sort of try and move it around a little bit so that you get nice different layer of splodges. Okay, now that will take probably sort of 15-20 minutes to dry under normal conditions, so I will have to be very careful on this as I make the rest of the card. But I'm going to put it to one side so that we can work on the rest of it while that's drying. Okay, so that was our first panel done. So then here I have used a vellum stencil. So this is just our vellum cardstock, and I've pre-cut one so that we're already done. So when this is dried a little bit more, I'm actually going to attach this onto here, so that gives just another layer and another texture. But as I say, we'll let that dry. And then I've got my butterflies, and I've got my thread here, and also my greetings. So if we concentrate on those pieces and this strip up here. So I will show you this strip first. So I simply took a piece of white cardstock. This is our new basic white cardstock, and I'm going to take some Stampin' Blends. Now I've chosen to use two colours. I've chosen Mango Melody and also So Saffron, and I simply took the brush end of my pens and started just to lay down a little line of colour. I then took the light version of Mango and just started to blend these two together here. This is just short of my card width, so I'm just going to extend that just a little bit. Okay, then I took my dark So Saffron. I'm going to do the same again and just try and blend these. Now these are slightly different colours, so you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get them to blend, but I'll come back to it and have a look in a little while. And then light So Saffron, so that will blend nicely with that. So actually they're not blended too badly, but I am going to go back and just add an additional layer just to darken certain parts down. Just to ensure that one blends nicely. And actually I think that will do. Okay, so I'm going to put that to one side just to dry off completely, and then we'll add that onto our card afterwards. So it's really nice and simple. There's not too much sort of involved in it. It's just a really nice sort of different sort of project really. So now I've done that, the next thing I want to do is to colour my thread and also do my butterflies. Now to colour my thread, what I tend to do is just to take a piece of scrap card or paper, whatever I've got, and I'm going to take some of our thread here. Now I don't need a huge amount, so I'm just going to cut myself a length, probably 30 centimeters or something like that, And I'm going to again take my dark Stampin' Blend. So this is my dark Mango Melody Stampin' Blend, and I'm just going to colour my thread. Now some colours will obviously cover better. This is still going to be quite rustic because of the colour in it, but it will coordinate really beautifully with our card. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes you just kind of have to, I usually hold it and then I try and roll it to try and get it sort of covered on all sides. Okay, so that's our thread done, so we can come back to that in a while, and I think you can see now how lovely and sort of yellow that is, so that's really good. So the next thing is our butterflies. So I'm going to go back to my piece that had my strip of colour on here, which is now completely dry, so that's good, we'll use that in a while. And I'm going to take the butterfly stamp and my black memento. Now I'm going to ink the whole of this stamp because I need the 3 butterflies. I don't need the greenery, but I'm going to stamp it all anyway, and then I know everything's got a good covering on it. Okay, so I pressed a little bit harder perhaps than I would have done normally with that, but I wanted to make sure that I had a really good blackness to all of my butterflies, because that's obviously what creates our sort of impact really. Now it's entirely up to you. You could use Stampin' Blends on this if you wanted to, that would be absolutely fine, or you can just use your stamps that come in the set and your ink pads, which is what I'm going to do here. So I've got So Saffron and Mango Melody. Now So Saffron is obviously the lighter of the two, and Mango Melody is going to add my detail. So I'm just going to take another piece of sponge, and again you can use a dauber, whatever you have. And what I want to do, I'm going to start off with this little one here. So I'm starting with my lighter colour, which is So Saffron, and then going to take a sponge and pick up some of the Mango Melody. So I've got some mango on here. Now what I want to do is just to add some to the centre of my butterfly. Now you probably can't see that very well on the camera, I'm guessing, but it is there. And then I'm just going to line this up and stamp my butterfly. Now don't worry if you go over a little bit, I can't see the camera position very well on this, so you can see how it colours it in the two-tone. If we want to add some more depth of colour to that, we can do that when we do the next section. So again, I'm going to start off with my So Saffron, and then going to use the Mango Melody just to add some darker colour to that edge, and again just line it up. So beautiful, these stamps, they really are lovely. And finally on my last one, and again just down that centre, so I get a really nice sort of two-tone effect. Okay, so I've got different depths of colour depending on sort of how much of the mango I've added, which is really nice because it kind of just develops that up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Wink of Stella, and I'm going to just paint over the top, and you'll find that the Wink of Stella will start the colour sort of merging together a lot nicer, and then you get the more of a contrast coming through. So again, I'm just doing that over here. If you wanted to add any deeper colour, of course, you could use, you know, your blender brush or a paintbrush just to add some more depth. But I'm quite happy with the depth of colour on here. I think it will show really nice once it's on. Okay, so that's our butterflies done. Now we do have some lovely dies that, as I say, that cut these all out together. But because I want to remove any white edge from my butterflies, I'm actually going to cut them out by hand. So they are a little bit fiddly, but they're not too bad. My advice is to kind of just be a little bit free with it. Don't worry too much about following the lines exactly, and actually remove the antennae as well, because that will drive you nuts trying to cut that out. So I'm just removing them, and then what I will do, I will add them back in with a pen once I've got them in place. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to create my greeting. So I'm just going to use a scrap of black cardstock that I've got here. I'm using my Versamark ink pad and also my greeting. So I'm just going to ink this onto here. And I'm just using white embossing powder for this. I'll just quickly heat set that. Okay, so that's all heat set. So now I'm just going to trim that to get it to a nice banner. And I'm going to use my little trimmer to do that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just to cut a length here. Now, this isn't any particular measurement. I kind of just made this up as I went along, and it will depend on your greeting, sort of how long you want it to be as well. So I'm just going to literally just trim it until I'm happy with the size. So don't you know, don't worry too much about that. And I want to have, I've gone for a square end on the end of this one. So I left a little bit longer. If I bring in the original card, you can see I've left it a little bit longer. This one's a bit shorter than the previous one, but you get the idea of how it's made up. So whilst I've got my trimmer here, I am actually going to trim this section here. So what I want to do is just to make sure that I trim my actual coloured line that I coloured earlier, and I've left the extra bit at the end there, because what we're going to do is we're going to attach this to here like that, so you'll see it will really sort of pop out once it's against the grey. So this is probably still a little bit wet, but we're nearly there. So I'm going to start putting it together. I'll just need to be very, very careful. And then finally, the last piece, this little section here, was from the Be Mine stitch dies. And again, I've just used a scrap of card just to cut that border, because that's going to sit over here. So it's going to be, you're not going to see this sort of raw cut edge here. Okay, so as I say, the first thing I want to do is attach this onto here. So what I'm going to do is actually do this in reverse, because I've got wet ink, and I'm just going to add a line of glue to that area there and position it on top. Now you can give yourself whatever size border you want to give yourself. Mine's about 0.5 centimetre, I would say, thereabouts. I just want to make sure it's sort of as equal as I can in depth. And I'm just going to trim that excess off the end. Okay, so remember I cut out this vellum floral before. Now vellum is notorious for sticking down, because no matter what glues you use behind it, they do all show to one degree or another. So there's various ways that you can disguise that. So if I bring in my original card, So where my greeting falls here, that would be a really good place for me to put glue, because that's going to be hidden behind, and equally where my butterflies are as well. So what I'm going to do is my greeting is going to go across the middle here. So initially what I'm going to do is just to add a couple of little spots of glue across these middle leaves here, and some of these will probably be cut off, but just so you get an idea. So I'm going to stick this on here. As I say, it's very light, so don't worry too much that this is sticking up at the moment, because once our butterflies and everything else are on, that will hold it down. Now that will be sufficient to hold it, so don't think you need anything more than that. I will trim off these edges probably in a second. So I have my greeting here, and I have my pretty edge. Now you can do what I did here, and I did one shorter than the other, or you can actually put them so that they're exactly the same. I think I might go exactly the same this time. So again, I'm just adding some glue to the excess area. I've already got a nice sharp end on this. I'm just going to glue that in place. Okay, so that's going to go across here. Now I might just very lightly trim the top off that. Just a couple of mil, just to that's better. So that's going to go across here like this, but what I want to do is to add my thread. Now the way I did that was to use our glue dots. So I just tend to take a little glue dot, and I'm going to pop it just in the center somewhere. Remember, this is all going to be covered, so don't worry too much about where it is. And I'm just going to loop my thread, and as I loop, I stick it onto my glue dot. Now sometimes the thread has a mind of its own, so you kind of have to let it sort of flow. It's not worth trying to fight it. And then finally I'm just going to add another little glue dot there and pop that down. So again, this is all very raised and stuck in the air at the moment, but this will all lay flat once we start getting all our pieces on. So I'm going to start off with my greeting, so you can pop this wherever you want it to be. It doesn't matter. As I say, we're going to have butterflies covering other areas, so just feel free to have a play around. So I'm going to use dimensionals to add my greeting. I'm just going to hold it up this time, just so I can see roughly where it's going to go. Okay, so it's level at this end, and then it's just sort of raised as it goes across. As I say, my ink is still a little bit wet, so I am having to be a little bit careful. But now that's held a bit better in place, I can actually remove any excess leaves or any excess pieces that I have coming over the edge. Okay, so now what I want to do is add my butterflies, but I think what I'm going to do is actually stick this to my card base so that I know that it's all in position. If it was dry, then I would probably have done it sort of as I went along, but because it's wet, I just wanted to make sure that it was absolutely, I'm not going to get glue and paint everywhere. So I've stuck this towards the bottom of my card. And I always find the best way, if you want it to be stuck towards the bottom, stand it up and just give it a tap, and it will just make sure that it's actually level with the bottom of your card. Now can you see these are sort of raised a little bit? I'm going to pop a little butterfly down here, which will help. So I think we'll get away with it. But if you do find that this happens, what you want to do is just to add a little spot of glue, really, really tiny spot of glue, and then add some little gems over the top, and that will just disguise it for you. So I'm going to position my butterflies slightly different on this particular card because things are in different places. So I just want to have a play around and see sort of what kind of arrangement I would like to do. Obviously I don't want to cover my greeting. So yeah, so I'm quite pleased with that, and this one will assist to hold this down here. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to use some dimensionals, but I'm only going to use it on one of my wings. So I'm going to cut a piece off. So I've just got it on that wing there, and I'm going to add just Tombow glue to this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just position it so that this wing is flat and this one is just raised, so it looks like it's sort of at a little bit of an angle. And with this one, I'm just going to bend up the wing very slightly, add some dimensional to the back end of the wings, and then a little bit to his body. So that's going to go there, and again I'm just sort of strategically position it so it's going to hold that vellum down for me in place. And then finally this one here, I think I'm just going to add a little bit of dimension to his wings. But as I say, you can have a play around. You can decide where you want things to sit. Quite liking this colour combination, very pretty. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue just to the body here, and because it's going to be sitting sort of on the actual linen thread a little bit. So yeah, I'm quite happy there. Okay, so we're nearly there. So that's obviously our butterflies and everything else in place. That's absolutely fine. So now what I want to do is just take a fine pen, and I've just got a fine black pen. You could use your stamping marker, and I'm just going to add some little antennae just to the tops of my butterflies, and it just helps to sort of bring it all together really. Okay, so the last thing I did on this one was just to add some coloured gems. So I had those coloured gems from an old pack, but I haven't got any in this sort of colour, so I'm just using my stamping blend here just to add a little bit of colour to my gems. It just brings it all together, but of course you could use clear ones if you wanted to. These are very subtle. And again, I'm going to stick one down here, strategically placed, just to hold my vellum in place. So I'll just clear the decks here. So as I say, this is how I made this card. I've just noticed my blue one's slightly narrower. I must have cut it at a slightly different width, but you can get the general feel for it. So as I say, that's how it was all sort of put together. You could do it in a number of colours really. I think a really bright vibrant pink would look really nice with this technique. You can use all different dyes, so you can get all different effects, and just remember that you're looking for the negative of your die. You're not actually looking for the die cut itself. So this would be my die cut, and this would be my negative. But again, you know, if you wanted to, this would actually look quite nice if you had a bit of yellow added to it. You know, you can build up the layers, but the point was we was trying to create the sponging in the background. But you know, feel free to have a play around. I might add that on there just so you can see what it looks like. So I'm just going to cut that across. Just add a little bit of glue. Just adds another little dimension to it. It's all about creating layers. use my tweezers quickly just to help me. Okay, let's just trim the bottom off. Just going to move that one across just so it looks like it's all part of the same thing. So there we go. So that's using a little bit of the textured or the cutout die as well. So you can do all sort of number of things. You can see where my ink wasn't quite dry, look there. So just be careful of that. Once your ink is drying, just leave it for a little while just to dry off. I think I'll probably just add another little gem up there just to cover that up. So I hope you like that today, and thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.